You're listening to 100 Words or Less with Ray Harkins. Hello, one. Hello, all. Welcome to this podcast where we talk intimately with people who are involved in the punk, hardcore, metal, emo, indie rock scene, whatever it is, as long as it's come from small, sweaty rooms and is of the independent variety. You know what I'm talking about. You're here. You get it. If this is your first time here, welcome. If this is your 700th time here, also welcome. I appreciate the support regardless, because we are pulled in 9 million different directions in regards to our attention. So the fact that you are here right now is not lost on me. I appreciate it. And you know who also appreciates it? The guests on the show today. This is a slightly different flavor because normally we're obviously focused on, people who are like playing in bands, working at record labels, that sort of stuff. But I like to paint with a broad brush. And this person, one of the people, actually all of the people who wrote this particular book are musicians in their own right and have been involved in the scene and what have you. But let me just do this intro. Check this out. So we have Karl Buechner and Jeremy Mueller on the show today. Karl is a vocalist from Earth Crisis. Jeremy is a close friend and collaborator of his. Been friends for a long time, but they wrote a book, a young adult book called The Unraveling, The Council of Crows. It is book one that is out currently. And that's how this transpired, where truthfully, Karl reached out to me, was like, hey, I wrote a young adult novel. And I at first was like, what? What do you, really? I wasn't aware of this. I had no idea. And I wanted to know more. So asked him some follow-up questions and he's like, yeah, it's the whole thing. We're, have an audiobook on Audible and like, this is going to be a series. And I was floored. I was like, I had no idea that Karl had the writing bug, so to speak. And Jeremy is one of his close friends, collaborators. They broke the story together. There's a third author who did not appear on the show, but they did this and they put out the book. And it's, like I said, part one of a 3-part series. And it's a dystopian sci-fi young adult novel. I've read it myself. It's awesome. It's great. There are elements, like if you truthfully got into Earth Crisis at any point in your life, you will see some of the messages that are meaningful to Karl and his bandmates and obviously other people that are laced all over this story. And it's just so cool to watch people who are involved in one thing get involved in another creative pursuit and do a really good job at it. So I wanted to highlight this book in particular, but then also just talk to them about what it's like writing a book and getting it out and all of the processes that it takes in order to bring something to the world like this, because it's not as, straightforward and simple as like, oh, I'm just going to write it and then, I'll self-publish it. And it's like, how do you even do that? They work with a publisher, to be clear. But it's just so many questions I had. So that's why I was like, Karl, let's do this. That's what's happening. And I will include a link in the show notes where you can purchase the book. You can listen to it on Audible as well. So wherever you find your favorite audiobooks, you can check that out. But it was a great conversation and I'm excited to bring it to you. Let's talk about the ways that you can support the show for absolutely free. Just like take 30 seconds out of your day. You'll be able to do this. I appreciate it. For one, you can reach out to me at 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. Love to receive any and all feedback, guest ideas, all that sort of stuff. Love it. And you can also leave a rating and review on Spotify or simply you leave a rating on Spotify and a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. All of those things help this show get recognized and delivered to the people it needs to get delivered to. And a programming note, next week, because I do get a lot of questions come December, next week, 12/17, is our Best of 2025 episode with my friends Joey Cahill and Jeremy Boehm. We've been doing this for years, and people genuinely look forward to it. They just like the either camaraderie or recommendations of music, whatever it is. But it's a special episode for me, and I know for you as a listener as well. So programming note there. Also, weekly recommendations. I have a playlist on Apple Music and on Spotify Link is in the show notes, but I've been doing these weekly music recommendations just to, keep you dialed in with whatever music I'm tripping across, I enjoy, and hopefully you can dig into that playlist and maybe you'll find something new that you really, really enjoy. So the recommendation this week is literally something that was shared with me yesterday, and I listened to it pretty much the entire day. Shout out to my friend Paul, who, we just, shoot music back and forth occasionally. The band is called Ricochet Star. They released 2 singles. They've released multiple singles, but these 2 in particular are the ones that I listened to, Every Moon. And it's shoegaze. You know what we're talking about here. I mean, many bands exist in that milieu now, but there's something about what they're doing that really resonates. It reminds me a lot of that band from Belgium, New Moon, who's incredible. They have dialed in instrumentation, like they're doing more than just like creating a vibe, so to speak. And it's really, really good. So anyways, that is a recommendation. Like I said, hit the link in the show notes to your preferred streaming platform and you'll be able to find it all. So yes, now let's talk to Karl and Jeremy from Unraveling, the Council of Crows. We talk about books. We talk about creativity, authorship, all of these things. It's really exciting. Just to give you a little context as we drop into the conversation, you'll first hear Karl from Earth Crisis speaking about the plot of the book, and then obviously the other voice besides mine and Karl's is Jeremy, his collaborator and author. So here we go now.
The Unraveling the Council of Crows is the first book in a 3-part series that tells the story of a world where humans no longer exist. We were so awful to the earth and animals that through karma, we are no longer a part of it. But some of the creatures that live in this future world were prisoners in a vivisectionist laboratory who was basically turning them into drones for a mercenary group. So it's a way to kind of unpack a lot of the horrible things humans do to each other and the natural world. When you look at the overall plot, it's an adventure story. These animals are in conflict and they're struggling against each other. And some of them, kind of step back and say, well, why is this happening? And the reason why it's happening is because they didn't unlearn some of the horrible things that they were taught. Just as culturally, we have yet to unlearn some of the hostile and negative ways of life that really shouldn't be existing anymore. Violence as conflict resolution, the compete, conquer, exploit mentality that we've all been raised with. So, in this little story about these creatures, a lot of big issues come up and they get dissected and dismantled and shown for what they are. And in a lot of ways, it is a very unflattering portrait of how humans have chosen to live for all these years. So in some ways, the story, it flows a lot like, let's say, Narnia or Lord of the Rings or Oz. The villains and the heroes at first seem very clear cut as to who they are and what their goals are. But then things start to get a little muddy when you unpack, the reasons as to why they act the way that they do.
I was not aware of this book's existence, which is obviously something that you are trying to rectify by appearing on this podcast, which is good. But it was insightful for me to have Karl reach out and then also me look into it and be like, I didn't need any explanation once I read the description. And I was like, I see exactly what you guys are trying to accomplish with your creative pursuits, but then also combining who you are as people, even though, Jeremy, I don't know you as well as I know Karl. The inception point of you guys, first of all, collaboratively trying to write this with 3 people, that's not easy. And I know you're friends, but truthfully, why do this together? You guys could probably done this individually. So why did you guys use the, trifecta, as it were?
Well, honestly, I think so. We had this idea. Karl and I had an idea to write a story. Just to give you the quick version, we've been friends for a long time. We worked together.
20 years.
Yeah, 20 years. And we worked together, and my car did not have a working radio. So we would drive, and we drove long distances, and we would just make up stories to try to make each other laugh. And then we would just, whatever we would see, we'd just come up with stories. Well, Karl, being the madman creative that he is, unbeknownst to me, sir, he wrote everything down, which I thought was amazing. So all these little ideas that we had, and all of his own ideas, and all of, he wrote it down. Cause one night I called him and I was like, hey, what do you think about writing a book? And he was like, let's do it. And he had this one idea, which we really kind of heavily started investing in. And we both quickly realized that, Karl, he's obviously an amazing lyricist. I've got a creative mind, but I never tried writing, anything. And then we quickly realized that writing a
Jeremy, let me correct that. Jeremy's written short stories and poems. So he was always a writer.
But I was also always too afraid to share that stuff. It was just kind of for my own, and, so we reached out. So I was like, you know what? I was like, I bet my friend Keith would, could help us. He's an honors English teacher, and I was like, maybe he'd be interested in helping us out. So I reached out to him. I introduced him and Karl, and we all sat down, and Karl literally showed up the very first time we met in a room together, showed up with a duffel bag filled with notebooks of all of these ideas, stuff that we had written down, stuff that and this one particular short story that Karl had written, piqued Keith's interest. And Keith, and of course I wanted to write this other story that we were talking about. And I was like, I don't know if I want to write a middle grade or a children's book, and Keith said, well, he's like, I'll tell you what, he's like, I'd be interested in doing this if we did this, because I think we can do something really cool with this. And that's how it started. And we all it's been 10 years. We get into the room together. It's kind of a lot of fun, because we meet once or twice a week. Sometimes, Karl and I will meet 3 times a week. And, we always say, some dudes go out and they're in bowling leagues or dart leagues or whatever. We get together and we write and goof on each other. It's a lot of fun.
I really, that image of you, Karl, bringing in your duffel bag of notebooks, I get the idea of jotting down these ideas and being able to express yourself in different ways that clearly you weren't able to be. It's not like if you showed up to the Earth Crisis practice space and are like, guys, here's this idea. So Scott and the rest of them would be like, dude, what are you talking about, Karl? We can't write, we can't have a central character as a mouse. That's gonna it just doesn't make any sense. So I get why you were being able to express yourself in a different way. I guess the question that I wanted to ask in regards to that was just where did you start to get pulled towards other creative pursuits besides you obviously being able to express yourself in Earth Crisis? 10 years of notebooks like that, you're jotting down a lot. So where did that come from?
Well, here's the thing, and I'll just give you a quick background.
Yep.
Keith is an honors English teacher, and he was an agented stand-up comedian who toured. So he wrote all of his own material, and he went out on the road, and he, performed with some big names that are, now on Netflix or whatever else. And he also took a lot of time, and he backpacked through Southeast Asia. He and his brother ride motorcycles. So he's a super adventurous guy, super creative guy. And, Jeremy was writing poems, and he was writing short stories. Also another super adventurous guy, out exploring the Adirondacks and the Finger Lakes and everywhere else. So we all have that same spirit. And from the beginning with skateboarding, for instance, like we would build a quarter pipe or a half pipe together as a team. And it's the same for all the bands, build it together as a team. And I think being able to unify with Jeremy and Keith, they emboldened me to work on developing a very primitive short story and turning it into something real, and then just working collaboratively to turn it into a world together. And that's why it took so long. That's why it took 10 years, because, more than just writing a story, we were like building a world together where, all of these characters have backstories and families, and there's different lands and conflicts and things happening on their own historical timelines that weave together. So that's pretty much how things got rolling. And I think how we got to the point where we are now, working as a team.
Right. Well, and I think that appreciate the background there, because I think it's like you're all cut from the same cloth. You all have different pursuits as far as like what you've done professionally, what you've done creatively, but then as most good working collaborations go, where it's like, okay, one person is going to bring this part to the table, is going to bring a riff to the table, is going to bring something. And then the other person is going to obviously either iterate off that or bring their own expertise towards it to be able to build towards something. And it's like, your Jeremy's experience might be more in like, all right, I'm going to really build out these characters. Whereas Karl is going to be like, all right, I'm going to, build out this world or whatever. You guys can go off, but then come back together and then hopefully be able to not yell at each other too much in the creative process. Or maybe that's a fun part. Who knows?
It is a fun part of it.
Well,
right.
It's no different than being in a band, once you get to a point where you share the same vision and you learn how to work together, it's just on the rails and it's moving forward, But at the beginning, Jeremy has always been very honest about this. Like, I don't think any of us really knew how to put it together. We knew the type of story we wanted to tell and the kind of stories we were developing, but the mechanics of it took a little bit.
Yeah, it did. And of the three of us, I'd say Keith was able to upload the quickest, as far as, like how to piece it together, because there's, when you're, the formatting, of a novel, that's where, it's easy just to jot words down on a paper, on a computer or on a piece of paper, but it's like, with the punctuation and like where dialogue breaks and begins and all that stuff, it is like, and then he literally taught it to us, and then once we kind of went over that hurdle, like Karl said, like we kind of started hitting on all cylinders, and we'll have those times where, like one, like, well, one of us comes into the room, with this great idea. And to your point, earlier about, like you're collaborating, it's like there's nothing worse than coming into the room with this idea that you've had for a few days before you see the guys. You're like, I got this great idea. And then it's crickets. And then just two thumbs down. And you're like, oh man.
That has rarely happened.
But
honestly.
But at the same time, it is very humbling because, like writing with both of these guys, they're, I always say, like, I'm always in awe with what they bring, to the table. So I always feel like I'm like, okay, it helps me up my game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I like the fact that, like you were talking about, there's a discipline that has to be learned. And like you guys were saying, where especially coming from like the independent punk and hardcore community, you obviously do so many things that you have no business doing. You're like, yeah, I'll set up a show. I don't have no idea what that means. Like, I guess I'll go into a recording studio and yell into a microphone. Like, no one asks permission for these things. And so like you guys applying that same sort of, fearlessness, whatever, ignorance, whatever you want to call it, but then have some structure built towards it. And then being like, okay, now we can kind of move forward on this. The thing that I'm curious about was the, like you were talking about, Jeremy, where it's like, you the idea of being like, dude, I don't want to write like young adult stories. And like, how, how did you guys, I guess, land on that focal point of being like, okay, this is
structure of who we are trying to write towards, knowing full well that obviously people of all ages can read it. But how did you guys land on that particular premise?
Well, I think that, we once we all kind of sat down and agreed, okay, this is the story that we are going to try and write. And, for Carl's, an uncle, and Charles was younger at that point, when we first started. So, and I had 2 young boys at home, and
Keith has a young niece and nephew.
And he's also a teacher. So it's like, it kind of came naturally. And then we kind of leaned on all the stories that we loved, from growing up, a lot of the John Bluth, kind of stuff, obviously like Watership Down, The Secret of Nim, those stories that we loved, stories that are kind of for, like you said, like for all ages, so it was kind of, it got, I think in my mind, it was harder than it actually was. Once we started writing, I'm like, oh, well, we're all kids at heart, and I had a nice, it was really great to be able to go home and read to the boys. And if I could tell if they were engaged or not, I'm like, okay, well, we're hitting here or we're not hitting here. Plus, I also love this because obviously with little kids, I'm watching the movies that they're watching and reading the stories that they're reading. So I love the stories that are kind of for everybody. A little bit of, adult humor sprinkled in there so the parents can have a laugh, while they're reading with the kids, so that was important to us.
Right. No, and that's, no matter how, calloused you become to the world or, more of an adult you are, where it's just like, oh, animation, young kid stuff, like there's nothing of value attached to that. And it's just like, no, you're obviously a soulless human being because you're not paying attention to like the actual story behind what it is that's being laid out. But I can understand the, not the reticence, but just being like, how are we going to capture this story that, has so many different meanings and what we are trying to get across in it in the form of a young adult story? Because sometimes it's like, oh, we got to stand off the edges. And it's like, you don't really.
Yeah. I think, one of the most beautiful things about, like Watership Down and, like The Secret of Nim specifically, is when I was a kid, I enjoyed it for what it was, like I loved it. It was a beautiful John Bluth cartoon movie. And I just loved watching it. And then as I got older and would rewatch it, I'm sorry, John Bluth. Thank you, girl. Some of that messaging started to hit for me. And I was like, oh, okay. So, like it was very important for us to have a message, but have it not be in your face. I know that, I always joke that my dad always says, yeah, if I told you to do something, I know you wouldn't do it. And I've always been that way. Like, so, that was also, kind of important for us too, and that was one of the early things we got back from Keegan Kuhn, who had read the story and gave us a lot of tips. And he said, it's really, it sends a good, clear message, but it's not in your face.
A little break in the action to talk about our friends at evilgreed.com. They are an amazing purveyor of heavy music merchandise and records. If you listen to this show, I can guarantee you will like 97% of what they have there. First, they have a promo code specifically for this show. If you use heavy, the word heavy, and you type that into the little promo code box, you get 10% off your first order. And I don't care if you're into bands like Knock Loose and Speed, or if you're like more the death metal variety, if you're like, I like Blood Incantation, or maybe, I like Chelsea Wolfe. All of those things can be offered to you, but they have a very specific point of view. They don't just like offer anything and everything. They have heavy music, merchandise, and records, exclusive colors of vinyl. So many cool things. On top of it, they ship from Berlin, Germany, which I know you're like, oh my gosh, I live in the States. It's going to take forever to get to me, and it's going to cost an arm and a leg. Neither of those things are true. The shipping rates to us here in the States are advantageous, and you can get stuff that you can't find anywhere else at evilgreed.com. So again, use the promo code HEAVY for 10% off of your first order, and go to evilgreed.com. We love them. They love us. Let's keep this going.
Something I wanted to pull a thread on what you were talking about, just the ability to be able to find your voice within the story? And since you guys were obviously working together and pulling your, different disciplines, on top of one another, how did you guys, did you just focus on the voice of the characters and trying to bring that to life? Or were you also trying to put, learn your own writing style within the context of okay, I know how to, use adjectives better than Karl, or vice versa. How did you guys, kind of find the balance there as you were, trying to exploit your strengths and weaknesses within each other?
Well, I've got to give Jeremy and Keith full credit. I mean, both these guys are creative geniuses that are truly a joy to work with. I mean, everything that gets brought in here gets looked at from all kinds of angles. And yes, we do collaborate, but I've got to say, something that, one of the things Keith always says is these animals in our story look back at humans the way we would talk about mythological gods and monsters from Greek or the Roman pantheon. It's like over the top horrible. And that's kind of the way the animals view some of the things that they're coming across in the ruins of our world, like the weaponry or the slaughterhouses or whatever else. And a lot of the things that the villains discuss are kind of a projection of that.
Got it.
And I think also when it comes to the question, as far as the writings, how we write, like the style or how we have found one voice, that that wasn't easy. At first it was, a lot of back and forth and a lot of rewriting. How many times do we rewrite chapter 1?
I was not happy with chapter 1. Even when more than half the book was written, I was like, guys, let me take another crack at this and show you how I think the draft should flow.
At one point, the computer or one of us is going out the window. That's how many times we rewrote it.
It was over 3.
Yeah,
it was over 3.
It was definitely well over 3 times. And but the funny thing is like Keith pointed out a couple weeks ago, that the final version that we ended up on, the very first sentence is actually the very first sentence of the little short story that Karl wrote, which is kind of cool, and
is that real?
Yeah, it is real. And
you're just learning about this in real time. I love this.
Well, it's funny though, because so we kind of developed this process within the room, which is we call it the 3 filter process. So when we come to the room, we will we'll start with an idea, and then one of us will take that idea, and that varies depending on who maybe had the idea or who might jump up and say, I want to take that. And then we give ourselves a week or a couple days, and we'll say, okay, I'm going to take this idea. I'm going to write this chapter. And then it goes on to the next person. And then that person takes that and they do their thing to it. And then it goes on to the final person. And then we will sit down in the room and we will read that chapter and then make any adjustments or any changes, that we see necessary, and then once the 3 of us give it a thumbs up, we move on. And I think that's how we have found our voice, because it is truly all 3 of us writing it. And we've actually gotten to a point now, and it's kind of funny, where we don't even remember what each of us wrote. We don't even we can't even we will. It's constantly one of those things where it's like, who came up with this name, or who wrote this, or Karl will be like, that's awesome. Who wrote that? Or Jeremy, you wrote that. And I'll be like, no, I think you wrote it. Or all we just don't know anymore.
Right.
Yeah. It's become a stew.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful when you have something that you can look back on that multiple people are proud of and obviously put their name on, but then just be like, yeah, this is one body of work. Like you said, Karl, this is a stew. Like we have made this and there's all these ingredients and like, did you buy the potatoes? I don't know.
Yeah.
And it is, it's like, like we really do function like a band.
Yeah. And I think anytime, which is why I know that so many people, as they grow older, but have been exposed to like punk, hardcore, DIY, all that stuff, like it sticks to your bones in a way that it influences the way that you not only treat people, but even if you're doing stuff outside of the context of playing music, that still, that general premise will kind of bleed. You're like, this is how I know that it works. So I'm like, yeah we can, whatever. I can do pottery with the DIY nature. That's like the same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's a real thing, write what you know. Like one of the characters, Boswell, he is basically a bard and he's going through the land with his two friends who are twin sisters. They're sugar gliders. They're from a different part of the world and they're performing with him and he's singing the songs of his heroes. And a lot of the stuff that is woven into the fabric of the story is based off of crazy things that happened on tour, like being ripped off by promoters or having breakdowns or people that are hostile that you run into. It's all there, so I think that makes it fun too.
Yeah, absolutely. Not on the flip side per se, but like anytime anybody steps outside of and does something that is either unexpected or a person isn't known for, clearly, like Karl, you are obviously a front person for multiple bands, and the idea of being like, oh yeah, Karl from Earth Crisis is writing a kid's book. Like, that the joke writes itself there where people are just like, what are you talking about? Like, was there any,
it was always very immature.
but like, was there, clearly there was no trepidation because you obviously went forward through it and you're just like, judgment or not, like we're, this is coming out, we're enjoying this process, all that sort of stuff. Was there ever a concern of being like, oh, people are going to, not like people in the general term are not going to take us seriously because like, we're obviously not like previously published authors, like we may have experienced in like the short stories, poems, like, was there any fear from that side of things as you guys were going through this?
To be honest with you, no. And the only reason why I say that is I think is because we're all old enough now to just know that. And one of the big things in the room has always been we are going to make it happen regardless. Like it's that mentality of not when we find a publisher or not if we find a publisher, but when we find a publisher. It's always when and not if, or, like we just put our heads down and I think we just kind of like
positive mental attitude, envision the goal, and that's true. Like we found the perfect illustrator, Zulfar Rockman.
Yeah.
We found the perfect publishing company, Third World Studios. We dreamed that it would be not just a book, but an audiobook. And that also happened. The audiobook came out in July. The book came out on Earth Day. The next two, same thing. It'll be Earth Day of next year and then the one that follows. So yeah, so it's like envisioning the goal and just maintaining the discipline are how we've gotten to where we are right now.
Also, for me personally, it was something very important because, like I said earlier, I had written stuff and I'd written, in the past, but I was always afraid to share them with people. And, I had, this like fearful mentality when I was younger, especially when it came to the arts. I was always afraid to, I didn't want to hear the feedback or whatever. But then I had kids. And for me, one of the most important things I think, when you're a parent, or an uncle or teacher, as an adult is show the young ones that, you can do it. Just push through. And if it doesn't happen right away, don't give up. And I think that was kind of for me at least, was, it's what kind of drove me forward. Was I wanted to show my daughters and my stepsons, like, yeah, like, it's like, to go back to, talking about Karl and a band, and, like, he wrote this, I'm the co-owner of a concrete company, so, like, when I'm out on a job site, like, guys they'll look at me and they're like, wait, you wrote a kid's book?
Yeah.
I'm
like,
I'm
no way.
a bunch of hardened concrete dudes, and I'm like, yeah, I did, and they're like, wow, that's amazing, and I'm like, yeah, so for me, that was the bit, and I know it was for Keith, as well, to show his students and his nieces and nephews, and for us personally, it's just like, if you put your mind to it, and like, I know this is the age old statement, like, you really can accomplish anything. You really can, and here we are 10 years later, and we're working on our second book. We've got part of the third book written. We've got a little comic series for it, partly written, like
two of them.
Yeah.
Two of them. Yeah. That's the thing. Yeah. We've been working at this quietly for quite a while. And it was kind of hard to keep it under wraps because we wanted to share it and get feedback from people. But I was like, I really think we just need to keep this to ourselves until the work is finished. And I'm glad that we did.
Yeah.
Because I think it was like a nice surprise for like some of our relatives and some of our friends. And as far as like me feeling apprehensive about it, like, I will say this, anyone here in Syracuse that, has known me through all these years knows that I collect toys and teddy bears and comic books, and like, they know that I'm a kid.
Yeah, so we're kids. We got toys.
Yeah, and this is
hanging in here.
This came as no surprise to anyone around here or anyone that's ever toured with me. It's like, also, I think as far as like guys in hardcore bands go, it is a little bit different because I will wear a Snoopy hat on stage or a Garfield shirt. You know what I mean?
I'm always thrilled to talk about our friends at rockabilia.com because they sell you officially licensed band merchandise. And I don't care if you're into hardcore, punk, mainstream rock, hip hop, classic rock, they got it all. And it's all officially licensed. But first, use this promo code 100 words or less for 10% off your order. It's an easy way for you to get, free shipping. I mean, it's awesome. I love this company because it's independently owned and operated. They have over 500,000 items. They ship to everywhere. And if you ever have any issues whatsoever, their customer service is top shelf. And they always have really, really cool deals and promos on specific items where, like, if you're going into the archives, be like, man, I wonder if they have this tour shirt from like 10 years ago. They do. And then it's on a rad discount. And then you use this promo code and oh my gosh, you are cooking with gas. But all joking aside, I love Rockabilia and what they do and the service they provide. And like I said, whatever genre of music you're into, punk, hardcore, metal, anything else, they got you. They have it in spades and it's all official licensed. Bands get paid, you win, everybody wins. Rockabilia.com, use the promo code 100 words or less to save 10% off your first order. Thank you, Rockabilia.
The two examples that you're talking about where it's, like owner of a concrete company and then, wearing a Garfield shirt on stage, it's fun to subvert expectations. Like,
it really is.
Totally. Or it's like, I mean, we've all experienced it where like you're going to see a band and then like the, singer of a black metal band is wearing like, a Carly Rae Jepsen shirt or whatever. Just like something that's like so off the wall where you're just like, that's cool, man. Like you're wearing what you enjoy and you embody regardless of what other people perceive that you should be.
Exactly.
Sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
The and you guys, I mean, it sounds like when you first started to meet and kind of pull together these ideas, like, was the conceit always going to be like it's a book or nothing else? Like, did you got to go down like, hey, this could be a graphic novel initially, or like this could be, a podcast, or like, what are the other ideas that you were kind of trying to extract, or was it always a book?
All of those ideas.
Okay.
I think initially we had thought we were leaning towards graphic novel potentially, and then we realized just how expensive it was.
Yeah,
for
thank
the
you
art.
for saying that.
And so we did settle on writing the novel, but we also decided that when we write this novel, we want this novel to like. we wanted to elevate the language, because, and, for like, cause when I was growing up and, reading, I always loved the books where I'd have to pull out the dictionary. I know kids nowadays, they don't know what that is anymore, but, I would pull the dictionary, the words that I didn't understand. I would, I'd look them up, and, it would kind of unlock this other little room in my brain. Like, oh, wow, this is great. So we decided that we wanted to do that. And we wanted to really write it visceral. Like, we wanted this story to be like, we want whoever reads it to be able to touch it, taste it, feel it, smell it, like that's like when we write, if those parameters aren't met within a paragraph or a chapter that we write, we'll scrap it and we will start over. Kind of give you the graphic novel, the cheap way.
Yeah. And that was my goal. My goal when we started writing this was, I want this to read the way a Don Bluth movie looks. Like, I want you to feel everything there as far as, oh, they're in this part of the world, or it's this time of year, so the details are very important.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And with the kind of going back to a little bit of what we were talking about, where it's like you are trying to encapsulate these, overarching ideas of, protecting the planet and, animal rights and, the corporations that are, doing massive damage to, the earth and the animals within it. There's a lot of a lot of alleys that you could go down. And I know that you have 3 books to explore all those. But that's hard to probably narrow it down. Where, what became your North Star of the things that you wanted to kind of focus on? Like, was there just basically like, here's the overarching, for lack of a better term, issue, and then we'll explore little things attached to it? Or did you want to use each of the books as kind of exploring a different theme, based around the way the story was going?
Yeah, we break it into pieces, throughout the book and the 2 that will follow.
Yeah.
So different issues get addressed, light is shined on certain issues that are, I think, purposely kept in the dark because they're so horrifying. I think your average person would turn against it. I think if your average person knew what was going on in a vivisectionist laboratory, they would want nothing to do with it, and they would seek cruelty-free alternatives. And a lot of progress was made in the past that I feel like the clock's getting turned back in some ways when it comes to that issue. So yeah, a lot is addressed throughout the course of the 3 books.
Yeah. And it's probably also fun for you in a similar fashion to be able to put these, just basically introduce these ideas, because that's obviously where all things start. Like, when you first run into an idea, whether it's, faith, straight edge, like, political systems, like, they have to get introduced to you at some point. And so I'm sure it was fun for you to just be like, hey, like, we're going to place this in here. We're going to define it a little bit, but then you're going to do the research. You're going to find out what it resonates with you.
Right. We're planting seeds that will hopefully germinate into something that will, grow into something bigger down the line. And yeah, exactly. We're introducing ideas and concepts, and I think kids will enjoy it as a fun adventure story with some pretty serious villains and some funny heroes. And when they return to it later, when they're a little bit older, they'll be like, oh, okay, I get what this is about here.
Right. Like, I remember hearing about deforestation a few years ago or whatever.
Yeah. It's also, writing these things too, because the 3 of us we're all very different people, and our belief systems aren't all the same, but I think that also helps us, when we write. But I will say that, once we dove into this and we started like piecing these things together and then doing the research, for the book, they kind of, it was like a kind of like putting that mirror in your face. You're like, oh, wow. Like, I could do better. I can be a lot better when it comes to, like what I eat, how I take care of the planet, like what I teach my kids, and that's been a very fun process for me. Like, for me, it was, and it's, it starts with the little things, but, like now Keith drives an electric car, because of this story, because of what we, like, and it's kind of cool what it's done to all of us.
Yeah. Jeremy finally stopped throwing his trash out the window.
He loves telling that joke.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, the lowest hanging fruit. It's like,
Yeah.
just like it's like, when people get in a car and they don't put on a seatbelt, you're like, what are you doing? Like, you're insane.
I know. When I tell the kid, that's funny you said that, like, because I'm constantly with the kid. I always do this thing. Karl knows, because Karl does not want to put a seatbelt down ever, and it drives him nuts when I slow down. And I'll only say to him, "Friends don't let friends drive without seatbelt, Karl," and he just irritates him.
Oh, I have the same job. I say Mad Max never wore a seatbelt.
Yeah.
Mad Max. I like that is your argument against wearing a seatbelt. Like, listen, they were traveling across the deserts of Australia. Like, they didn't need to worry about that.
But it is funny how it is, because like I know when I say it to the kids, and they go, "Oh man," and they put their seatbelt, and then I distinctly remember my parents having a station wagon, and I would just lay down at the back, for 2 hour or 3 hour car rides, not a care in the world.
And for people who don't know us, obviously I'm kidding. Jeremy would never throw his trash out the window. I just say that because it makes him laugh.
It does.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, you may have thrown one piece of trash 15 years ago out the window, and Karl will clearly never forget it. It's fine. The fact that, you guys are, now like, doing book events at libraries and showing up to like Comic-Cons and stuff that, you guys are as individuals fans of, but then now like you're showing up collectively and being like, you have to be salespersons for a thing that you're passionate about, but you've never had to do a lot of this stuff. You've done maybe things that are adjacent to it.
Well,
what have you kind of learned in that process of kind of putting yourself out there in ways where it's just like, well, I guess we're doing a signing at a library, or like, does it feel that different, or is it pretty kind of, I guess in your wheelhouse or something you're comfortable with?
I mean, I'll let you answer it.
So for Karl and Keith, it is not it doesn't seem to be they don't ever show that nervousness, or anything like that. I am not. I've been in bands when I was younger, but we never really played. I was just in the garage doing stuff, whatever. But like I said, like growing up, I was a pretty shy person. But I did realize very quickly that I'm a low talker, and that's not a good thing when you're reading in front of a bunch of people. So I got Karl and Keith on either side of me constantly kicking me to talk louder, but I do get nervous. So that part has been very, like I'm still acclimating to that. Obviously Karl's been the front man for numerous bands, and he's been doing it for 30 years. He was a stand-up comedian. He's also a teacher. So he's, comfortable in a classroom and talking in front of groups of people. That is where I struggle, cause, and it's funny, cause I always have to remind myself, like, we got to make this happen. We've got to we've got to do this. I've got to talk loud. I've got to enunciate. I can't.
I got to be charming. Like all these things that are so weird to me.
Yeah, because deep down, I really just want to hide behind a computer and write.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's that byproduct of any piece of art that you put out in the world. I mean, like, yes, there is a sort of implicit thing of like, okay, I understand if I write a song and I'm in a band, I'll have to get up on stage at some point in some capacity. But then there's so many things that ripple past it that you're just like, I guess I'm, like doing this, I'm on a television show now or whatever. I'm on, it's like those things you're just like, well, I, of course we'll do it, but like, I have to try to act like I am comfortable with it or belong here in some way.
But it has taught us a lot too, because even with social media, that whole aspect of like, like this, the selling part. And my wife, thank God my wife, she's very good at it, and she loves like editing stuff. She's a hairstylist, so she's constantly doing it for her business. So if it wasn't for her, we'd pretty much have the worst social media.
Yeah. Thank you, Melissa.
Yeah. Because every day, every time I'm down in the room, I'll get home and she'll be like, "Did you guys do a live? Did you record something?" And we always forget because when we get in here, we just want to get to work and and share our ideas, and so that's a constant reminder that we've got to be better at that. But thanks to her, we are okay. We're doing good. Because if it was luck to the three of us, it'd be pretty non-existent.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you'd just be like, I mean, that's like the conceit of bands that are forced to exist on TikTok because someone told them they needed to be on there, and then they're just like,
Yeah.
I guess I need to do a stupid dance or whatever. It's just like, how about do something that like kind of represents you? Yeah. But you need someone to push you in a direction.
It is important, and it's something that we quickly learned. It's kind of like, in that whole band mentality, it's like, if we want this to succeed, we essentially have to tour, like bands do, and that's something that like and if I'm being honest, I just didn't think about it. I was like, oh, this is, we wrote this thing, here you go.
Right.
And we're going to work on the next one.
It's been fun, like
it really has. Yeah.
We did the library up near Rochester. We went to Burning Books in Buffalo. We've done
Barnes and Noble.
Yeah, Barnes and Noble, Golden Bee, Books and Memories.
Yeah. We did Gen Con here in Syracuse, which that was a lot of fun.
That was my favorite.
That was a lot
like
of fun.
People were there in costumes. It was like something
Yeah.
that I had only seen like in episodes of The Big Bang Theory, but it was real and we were there and people were in line. It was amazing.
It was really cool.
Yeah, that was legit awesome.
One of the coolest things was we did the punk rock book fair at the I know I'm going to butcher the name. Is that I always say the name of this is it Irondequoit?
Irondequoit. You got it.
Irondequoit public library, and Greg Benoit put it on for us. And the coolest thing was when we got there, because that was one of the first ones that we did that was kind of outside of our wheelhouse, where we didn't have some friends or family showing up, or whatever. So we, like it was a little different, So, but when we got there, we were waiting outside, just kind of catching a breather before everything started. But then watching the kids walk in with books in their hands was just one of the coolest experience. It was like, wow, this is really cool. Like that was awesome. I just said that's a moment I don't think I'll ever forget.
Yeah. Little kids in line with teddy bears and our book.
Yeah.
And they're raising their hand, asking questions about the characters. I'm like, dude, we're winning.
And they were asking great questions.
Yeah.
Very,
awesome.
Very insightful.
Like they clearly had spent time reading and thinking about these guys.
Yeah. That's special.
Awesome.
Well, I mean, it makes your characters come to life in a way where you're just like, wow, I didn't think about that or whatever. Like, oh, okay. That's a good question. Yeah.
Yeah. That was cool.
That's really neat. Last few things I wanted to hit on was the, what did you guys, I know you said it was a long process, but, what do you think you learned, about, and this kind of hits on what you were talking about, your co-author riding an electric car now. What do you think you learned about yourselves throughout this creative process, that was either, subverted an expectation of yourself, or that was, enlightening for you to go through this different creative process than you had in the past?
I mean, I think for me, one of the things that, we've been blessed with is patience. I think when we went into this, I thought it was going to happen a lot quicker, but after a while, I was listening to Jeremy and Keith and I'm like, no, this, in some ways it's like a band, but it's not going to come together like an album does in a year and a half or something. This is going to be a process, and there's going to be a lot of revisions. And I would, submit all my stuff through text, or I would write it in a notebook and then convert it. And, we'd all pour over it together. And for me, yeah, I just thought it would happen a lot quicker, but just learning to slow down and take the time to, craft it and develop it. That was one of the big things for me, to just learn that it's not going to happen in the blink of an eye, you know?
Sure. The same structure that you were roughly used to in other creative pursuits. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, you know?
Yeah. I think it's the same for me too. You know, aside from, you know, what we talked about earlier, as far as like looking into that mirror, you know, and kind of, you know, like say, if we're going to put this on paper, you know, and we're going to, you know, preach in a sense, you know, like it's like,
yeah, that's a good term.
Better start practicing it, you know, and just, you know, and really kind of like push it, you know, with the kids, and, you know, and really kind of keep an eye on like how I treat the environment every day, you know, and like, what are the things that I can do, you know, or, you know, I can, you know, that will help, that can help. Also, you know, aside from that, but back to the writing side, you know, in the creative side was, I really learned to come out of my shell, you know, and I like, cause even at first, even when we got together, you know, it was intimidating to write with the two of these guys. They both have like such creative minds, and, you know, they've had their own successes, you know, on, you know, with different endeavors. So I kind of felt like, oh, can I keep up with these guys? Like, and I honestly, you know, I think what I learned is that, you know, like I did have, you know, the courage to kind of step out and push myself, and really, like, you know, get to a point where I feel like, okay, I can punch with these guys, you know, I can hang with them. Yeah. So, but that helped me, you know, because, you know, when you do it in one area, then it's like, okay, you know what, I'm gonna push this into other areas, you know, in my life, and that has helped me tremendously.
And, you know, I want to credit that too, you know, especially Jeremy and Keith. Like, they pushed the stories in directions that I don't think I necessarily would have on my own. And in some ways it became more severe. In some ways it became more urgent. And, you know, there is a higher level of violence than what I originally thought we would have. But I do think overall it's enriched the work.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I love that. Well, and like you said, with the fact that you have a release plan for the next couple of years, you know, Earth Day 2026, Earth Day 2027 for the books 2 and 3, and then obviously the comic aspect. Once you, you know, I know we're talking about years down the line, like, is your desire that you guys want to travel as a sort of creative troupe at this point? Like, you know, do you guys already have plans in your own heads to be like, hey, I mean, I know we got to get through these first 2 book, or these second and third book, but, you know, do you have desires to continue to work together after this journey?
Yeah, and we already are. We're working on a story about it's reality based. It's the true account of a pastor who was attached to a Navy base in the South Pacific in World War II. And I can't say too much about it.
No, don't bury the lead.
Yeah, that's something we've been working on too.
Yeah, that's been a fun another project that we've been working on. But yeah, we have plans to continue to working together until we can't write anymore. I always say, collectively, between the three of us, we could write something different for the rest of our lives and still not get through it all. You know, so
we've got 2 other series after this that I want to work on, but I know that there's other genres these guys are looking forward to exploring as well.
Yeah,
as a team.
And as far as, like, you know, the traveling piece, you know, yeah, that is something that, it's funny, like, you know,
they just went to Baltimore.
Yeah, Keith and I were in Baltimore, and when, like, on our way back, we started looking up all of the different book fairs and all, you know, like, you know, throughout the, you know, figure we'll start on the East Coast, and, you know, but yeah, we want to start planning that. You know, obviously right now our big focus is getting book 2 ready for edit. So once we're there, you know, we can free up a little bit and try to get out and do more of that. And I know Keith has talked about maybe hitting some schools, you know, which I think would be a lot of fun. We did his high school at the end of the school year this past year, and we were in the auditorium, and they had three different grades come in, and that was a lot of fun.
That was awesome.
And so we'd like to do more of that.
Sure. That's super cool. And last thing I want to ask, just from a sort of, business perspective, what has surprised you, I guess, about the publishing industry? Like, I mean, even on the indie publisher level, like, it's very different than other, maybe what an average person would expect, a book to look like to get it into stores and all that sort of stuff. What's been, I guess, the most interesting thing that you've learned throughout the sort of business side of things on getting a book out there?
Well, I think that so for me, it was all new. So I guess I didn't really know what I didn't know.
Sure.
But in my mind, I was like, well, we got a book deal. So like, we're going to be stars. We're going to be, and it is, it's a lot. It's like everything else. You really got to work at it. Like we said, earlier, like, in order for this to really succeed or really, gain traction, we have to do the legwork and get out there and kind of push it like a band pushes an album, go on tour and do those types of things. So that stuff was, surprising. And also back to your earlier comment about, talking about, like, what the heck, what were we talking about? Like what I didn't know,
when it came to publishing?
Well, so just, man, I just completely lost my thought. We'll have to edit this part out.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, now I'm leaving it in.
No, yeah.
I'll let you flounder. No, I'm just
kidding. I guess that honestly, so one of the biggest things that I did learn, or we learned is, like the average first time author only sells like, I think the number, don't quote, I mean, I think the number was like around 250 copies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty, it's pretty astonishing.
I was like, wow, that's, I would have thought that number would have been a lot higher, like in my mind, I'm just like, because I remember making a comment to the publisher about selling like 10,000 copies or whatever. And he was like, whoa, hold on, like, that would be amazing. But, and, so, I mean, that was interesting to learn.
Mm-hmm. I will say this though. We have far surpassed that number. And when the book debuted, we were number one in a very interesting category. It was children's dystopian science fiction.
Yeah.
Which I didn't know existed. And I thought that was awesome.
That was cool.
And the book is doing well, and it's been reordered and everything else. So there is a lot of forward momentum. And one of the things that surprised me was how quickly the audiobook came together and was released. I thought that would take a lot longer.
Yeah.
And I wondered if it would be like between book 1 and 2, but it actually came out within months. So that was actually a nice surprise.
There you go. Hopefully that was interesting and engaging for you. I know it was for me. And, I know very little about the publishing world. So hearing how they brought it to life, how they actually created it, collaborating, is very much like a band. And that's exciting to see that different creative pursuits can resemble what it's like playing music with friends. So anyways, big shout out to Karl, Jeremy, and you need to buy the book. Just buy the book. Even if it's for yourself, you're an adult. It's, I know, not aimed at you, but you will still find enjoyment with it. So next week, like I mentioned at the top of the show, we have our Best of 2025 episode with Jeremy Boehm and Joey Cahill, where we talk about our favorite records of the year, top 10s. It's a real fun one. We actually kept it a little bit tighter from a time perspective, because sometimes people have shared in the past where it's like, dude, 2.5 hours? Like, that's rough. What is this, Joe Rogan? And I'm like, no, it is not. So we kept it a little bit shorter. Hopefully that will, make it more engaging for you or something. I don't know. But regardless, that's what we got next week. And until then, please be safe, everybody.